You ready, Matthew? Your thumb means yes. Well, it's Tuesday night for those that are online, live streaming with us. It is Tuesday night, time for Second Look. We've got a company of people here, maybe joined by more, but we're in Revelation 8 tonight. Unfortunately, if you are watching in the comfort of your home, you cannot access our study guide that we've got. But those that are here, you'll want to get one. And we'll follow along tonight. We're going to start by reconnecting some dots. It's been a bit since we've done this format on Tuesday night, and no complaints about the format we did follow for 2 or 3 weeks, but it's been a while. So we're going to reconnect, come back to our picking up point, which is Revelation 8. And for those online, you can turn to Revelation 8. And then we're going to connect a few dots and get reoriented and then come back and drill down on Revelation 8 itself. As I worked through some of this last week or so, I realized that we're probably not going to get all the way through the 6 verses, but that is my fond hope. So let's pick it up. What we're doing as we go through Revelation, just a reminder, and those that are here know, and some watching may know, we are not looking for an end-time calendar. People have done that through the years and tried to use it to guess dates and all of that at the extreme end of the calendar business. We're not doing that. What we are doing, and I think it's much more valuable, though it is more time-consuming, is we're looking at the ways John tries to get us to see what he sees. He's got a tough assignment. He's been told by no less than Jesus, you're to write down what you see. That's his charge. Write down what you see. He gets a series of visions. That's what we call the Revelation. The Greek word for this book is the apocalypsis, the apocalypse, and I think largely thanks to blockbuster movies, we think of an apocalypse as boom, some big cataclysm. But the word actually means unveiling, a revealing, and that's why at the top of the book, we get the whole gist of the book. It's not about an end-time calendar. It's not about figuring out who gets the mark of the beast and what does that mark look like and who's the Antichrist and his little buddy, the false prophet, and all of that. That's not what it's about. The first sentence says what it's about. It is a revelation, an apocalypse, an apocalypsis, an unveiling of Jesus Christ. And we get to see in some form, what John saw, which was Jesus, whom he knows, whom we know, but not like John had ever seen him before. And so he is as he's always been, but somehow it's been missed. But John is clued in. He sees Jesus as he truly is. He got a little glimpse of him when he was one of the party that went up to the top of the Transfiguration Mountain and saw Jesus glorified. A little bit of his glory leaked through, not all, but now he gets a fuller dose in chapter 1. And then he gets a series of visions. And that's what Revelation is. That's what the revelation of Jesus Christ is. It's a series of visions. It's not one continuous vision. And we'll see that beginning especially next week as we delve into the vision of the trumpets. We'll be introduced to it tonight. But it's a series of visions, and the assignment John has got is almost impossible. Write down what you see. Well, he sees the throne of God. He sees heaven in all its splendor. He sees all the divine beings assembled. Myriads of myriads of myriads is the Greek wording. Millions of millions of millions. He sees that. And he sees all the different kinds of divine beings, which we have spent some time looking at. They're not all angels. That is one kind of divine being. Those are messengers. But there are seraphim and cherubim, and they're spirits, and they're just all kinds. And we've gone into some detail about their nature and their function and all of that. He sees them all. He sees all of the redeemed of all time. He sees them all. He sees us all. He sees all of these creatures that are representative of the animal kingdom. So he sees divine beings, he sees human beings redeemed, all called holy ones now. They're all sons of God. They're all B'nai Elohim. And he sees it all. Well, how does he describe that? It's impossible. There isn't a vocabulary for his assignment. So what he does is he creates a device, and he is the creator of the device. John creates the device of repurposing the Old Testament that he knows so well, and that most of his hearers will know. And he repurposes some of the Second Temple literature, some of the books that didn't make the cut. We talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls and other things like that. He repurposes some images from those as well. But primarily it's the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, and he never takes it out of context, but he takes bits of it. And John is not somebody who quotes extensively the Old Testament because there's never a full quote. And he never does an attribution like the other Bible writers do. You know, according to Jeremiah, according to Isaiah, he never does that. But he uses the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, without using paragraphs or even full sentences or even phrases, really. But he uses bits and pieces, fragments, images, pictures, words, references, activities, things that happened historically, things that are in the apocalyptic literature in the Old Testament, books like Ezekiel and Daniel, he draws from, Zechariah, Habakkuk, others, and he repurposes it. He says, let me borrow this familiar thing here, and I'm going to repurpose it for what I've got to do for my difficult job. And so that's what we've been doing. And chasing that down and trying to figure out where he got it and why he used it and what he meant by it and what is it he wants us to see by using that particular picture, that's what we've been doing. With the idea, and I'm pretty much sold on the idea, that while it would be easier to concoct an end-time calendar, and this is a harder approach, I think it does tell us what's going on, what's really going on, in a way that maybe those systems that we're more familiar with and make good movies and rousing sermons cannot do. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to reconnect the dots. What is it John wants us to see by repurposing? Anyway, before we get in, and we're ready for Revelation 8, that's where we are. But before we jump in full steam there, let's take a few minutes to get kind of the 30,000-foot view of what is going on here first, because what we're going to look at in chapter 8, it fits into a much bigger picture. But let's just get familiar with the first 6 verses of 8. When the Lamb broke the 7th seal, remember, we've had this divine council scene, this throne room scene, this courtroom scene, this legal scene that has to do with a violation of a covenant. And we've seen that in other places in the Old Testament, this procedure that you go through when a covenant has been violated. That's what's going on in Revelation 4 and 5, partly. You get this courtroom scene because there's been a covenant violation. And the Lord is calling the court to session. And you get a legal document, a scroll shows up, sealed with 7 seals. We're to take it that it's like wax seals that keep the scroll intact. You can't read it as long as those seals are unbroken. So there's a series of breaking of the seals. We get that. But once the seals are broken, now you can read the scroll. And that's what's happening here, okay? So the Lamb broke the 7th seal, because part of what happens in 4 and 5 is the scroll is going to go unread. It's going to go unbroken. It's going to go unread, and we won't know what's happening. And people are weeping, and John is weeping, and the elders are weeping. And then was found one who is worthy to open the seals. to break the seals and open the scroll. It is the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Okay? So that is the Lamb. That is Christ. When the Lamb broke the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. What a strange occurrence that is. We're going to spend a little bit of time on that tonight. In fact, I don't think we're going to move off that. Verse 2, and I saw 7 angels. Okay, this is what he's seeing in this vision. I see 7 of these divine beings, these messenger divine beings, who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. Okay, already he's borrowing and he's repurposing things that we can find in the Old Testament. Verse 3, another angel came and stood at the altar. Now, what altar are we talking about? There are 2 altars in the temple complex, in the tabernacle. There was the brazen altar where you sacrificed animals. That was outside. But inside the holy place, not the Holy of Holies, but inside the holy place, that first chamber that contained the lampstand and the table of bread, there was also an altar of incense. And that's the altar that's referenced here. We've already seen that altar of incense back in chapter 6, verse 9, with the breaking of the 5th seal. I saw underneath the altar, it's the altar of incense, the souls who had been slain because of the word of God, because of the testimony that they'd maintained, and they cried out with a loud voice. And that is the altar of incense. Their prayers are the incense. So we're back to that altar. Another angel came and stood at the altar of incense, holding a golden censer, which you would expect. You would take as part of the ritual sometimes some of the fragrance, some of the incense off this altar of incense there in the temple, and you would put it in a censer. JR, you know all about censers. The Roman Catholics have those. I think it'd be kind of cool if we had one for special occasions, but it's a metal bowl sort of thing, kind of covered, and it's on a chain or some kind of fastener, and you fill it with the smelly stuff, and then you swing it around so it will aerate, and be smelt all over the sanctuary. That's what's being referenced here. And they had those in the Old Testament temple. And he was holding a golden censer, and much incense was given to him, so that he might add it to the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar, which was before the throne. Okay, get a picture of the tabernacle, the temple arrangement. You've got the first room, chamber. The larger of the 2 chambers was the holy place, separated by a curtain. Beyond that is the most holy place, the Holy of Holies. The only article in the Holy of Holies, everybody knows, was the Ark of the Covenant with the mercy seat, a throne on top of it. And who's on top of that mercy seat guarding it? 2 cherubim. And what is their job? They're throne guardians. They're a different kind of divine being than the angels. Their job is throne guardian. Angels' job is messenger. That's why they're always saying, thus saith the Lord stuff. But the seraphim, the cherubim, their job is throne guardians. And so they're guarding the seat, the mercy seat. Well, the altar of incense is situated right next to the curtain. And then through that curtain is the throne, the mercy seat. So that's what's being pictured here. Okay, this is all the stuff he's borrowing. And he's trying to describe what it is he's seeing. And the smoke of the incense, verse 4, with the prayers of the saints went up before God out of the angel's hand. So this incense, that's the prayers of the saints, the prayers of the holy ones. Now, we're going to see that holy ones pray. We are holy ones. That's why the Bible calls us saints. It means holy ones. And we pray. Human holy ones pray. But divine holy ones, we're going to see, they pray too. And that's what's going on with that silence. Okay, we'll come back to it. The smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up before God out of the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer. Okay, now this is unprecedented. So far, it's kind of business as usual, as you would expect in the tabernacle temple. the earthly one. This is the heavenly one. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and threw it to the earth. The word that's used there, he didn't just lob it, he slung it to the earth. So there's some violence behind it. He threw it to the earth, and there followed peals of thunder. Remember, there's been silence. And there followed peals of thunder and sounds and flashes of lightning and earthquake, and the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. What we've got here is judgment is starting to unfold. With the opening of the scroll, you couldn't read the scroll until all 7 seals are broken. But now the Lamb breaks the last seal, and we're off to the races. Okay? And we'll come back to that, I'm sure, before we finish tonight. So what we've got here in this little tiny passage is a whole bunch of John repurposing things he knows about and they know about already from the Old Testament, and a little bit from Second Temple literature, stuff outside the Bible that they were familiar with. And he's getting us to see, he's got something he wants us to see. So let's see if we can see it. Now, we've got to connect a few dots before we jump in, just so we're all on the same page here. In Revelation 4 and 5, after Revelation 2 and 3, which are the letters to the churches where there is judgment on the churches, that's why you see that phrase over and over again, if you don't, or something like that. And he has a word for the churches, and apparently by Revelation 4, the church has got its act together and passes muster because the church is in heaven now. The open door and all that. The church is now in heaven. So in 4 and 5, you get some things being highlighted. You get the divine beings in this scene. You get the angelic hosts, the multitudes of heaven. Again, those different kinds of divine beings. They're all B'nai Elohim, they're all sons of God, but they have different functions and tasks and different natures, really. But they're all there, so you get them, and they're singing in chorus and all that. You can go back and review that yourself. But you also get human beings. That's what we've discovered the 24 thrones are about. You see the throne of God, but there are 24 other thrones. Those are the redeemed of all time. That's representative of us and Abraham and his and Jacob and his and all down through the centuries. That's the redeemed, okay? Because we've just gone through a time where the church, chapter 2 and 3, he that has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says, and I have this against you, and he would tell them, and we must have gotten our act together because there we all are. So you've got divine beings present in this scene, you've got human beings present, but you've got these curious creatures called the living creatures. And what are they? Well, they're representative of the animal kingdom. So you've got divine, you've got human, you've got animal, you've got all life there. In this scene, you've got everything there. In assembly, it's a throne room scene. It's a courtroom scene because there's going to be a legal transaction take place. This document is going to show up and it can't be opened. And the judgment of the nations can't start. Judgment of the church has already taken place. Judgment of the nations can't start. And the nations have to be judged partly on the basis of how they've treated God's people. And it can't start because nobody can open the document. Anyway, so it's a courtroom scene, it's an assembly scene, it's a divine council scene. That's what we've got in 4 and 5. And we know that because divine beings, human beings, animal kingdom, all there. It's divine council in session in 4 and 5. And what do you see in every divine council setting? We've looked at a number of them in the Old Testament. Here is an extended one here in 4 and 5. You see Yahweh surrounded, just the way he wants to be. I mean, go back and read 4 and 5, and you see the multitudes that are there, of human and divine and animal, and they're surrounding the throne. Surrounded, and he is in the middle. Yahweh on the throne is in the middle, just where he wants to be. Surrounded, in this case, by his heavenly family and his earthly family. Just where he wants to be, just where he's always wanted to be. And that's what you've got, Yahweh surrounded. And so we see the working out of the plan that's always been. The phrase that shows up over and over again in the Bible, as in heaven, so on earth. In other words, what happens in heaven, it needs to be duplicated on earth. That has been God's grand design. It will be worked out. That's why you get a new heavens and a new earth. You get Eden at the beginning of the Bible, and paradise lost, you get paradise restored at the end, and you get Eden restored at the end. That's what it's all about. But what I want you to see is that you've got this council scene. You've got the temple in heaven. See how it meshes in there? And then there's the reference to the temple on earth, the temple tabernacle on earth. And think about what we know about how that temple on earth, and probably the tabernacle even more, had all of these plant motifs, all of this garden motif. Remember? In the tabernacle especially, all those draperies had pomegranates at the bottom. And they had vines woven into them with spectacular colors. And you had leaves and you had trees. And when you get to the temple that Solomon built, and it's partly duplicated with the second temple, the doors are redwood from Lebanon, the cedars of Lebanon, inlaid with pictures of palm trees, and the inlay is olive wood. So you've got all of this garden motif in the tabernacle, in the temple, the permanent temple. Well, what is that all about? It's pointing backward to the original garden setting, where God set up Eden to be a place that would expand, that humans would expand Eden, so that finally the whole world would be Eden. But why did God do that? Because as in heaven, so on earth. It works its way into the Lord's Prayer, right? But what he's got in heaven, he wants duplicated on earth. He has a divine family in heaven. He has a family in heaven. He wants a family on earth. He has a home in heaven. He wants a home on earth. He wants to be surrounded by his family there. He wants it on earth. That's what Eden was all about, you see? And what you're getting in these pictures, and 4 and 5 is a perfect picture of a divine council scene, Yahweh in the middle, surrounded by his family. That's what the temple was. It was a picture of what God has in heaven and what Eden was intended to be, you see? I mean, you read the story about our first parents. They were visited by God. And in the garden, there are divine beings and there are human beings. That Nakish, that we call it a serpent, that tempted her, that was a divine being. She didn't know it was a fallen divine being, but it was. But the reason she wasn't startled and she had no problem conversing is because there were divine beings everywhere. And the plan was that there would be human beings everywhere. And then Yahweh would be in the middle of that. Well, of course, that all got messed up. But that's what was going on. As in heaven, so on earth. And what you get here with these divine council scenes is you get a picture of the temple in heaven, which is pictured in the temple on earth, which is Eden, you see? That's what we're to see. That's why John is borrowing all this temple language. Because how's the book going to end up? Eden restored. So all along the way with tabernacle and temple, you keep getting these glimpses of a return to Eden. Let's get back to Eden, you see? And that's what's going on here. So that garden motif is pointing backwards to Eden. And Eden restored will be a time of reconciliation. Paul talks often about a thing he calls the reconciliation of all things. It involves the reconciliation of all nations, all ethne, all people groups, back to God, back to Yahweh, reconciled. but also a reconciliation of the nations, the people groups with each other. You see? That's why you get the tree of life is for what? The leaves are for what? For the healing of nations. Do nations need to be healed? Oh my gosh. You bet. Ethnic groups, people groups? Yes, 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 yes. That's what the reconciliation of all things, that's one of the things it accomplishes. Anyway, that's Eden. That's where we're headed. And Yahweh dwells in Eden, restored. Yahweh dwells among us. Let's take a look at a couple scriptures. I referenced the end of Revelation. Let's turn there. Revelation 21, 1 through 4. Somebody read that out for us. And we're going to see a reference to L-O-R-D, Lord. Remember, every time it's in the Old Testament, it's L-O-R-D, all caps. That is just a cover for the word Yahweh, for the name Yahweh. Okay, that Lord, that God. There are many Elohim, and Yahweh is an Elohim, but no other Elohim is Yahweh. But here we're going to see Yahweh dwells among us. Take a look in Revelation 21. This is how it ends up. Eden restored. He's right in the middle of it. Who's got 21, 1 through 4?
Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the whole heaven and the whole earth had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, like a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. I heard a loud shout from the throne, saying, "Look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death, or sorrow, or crying, or pain. All these things are gone forever."
Well, I don't know if it's you, but I can't wait. I got to do 2 funerals this week. Probably got to do another one next week. I'd rather not. And this word guarantees us there won't be any more, right? That is Eden. That is heaven come down. That is, as in heaven, so on earth. And who's right in the middle of it? Who is right in the middle of it? Yahweh is right in the middle of it. Finish off the chapter. Look at verse 22. I saw no temple in it. We've been talking about the temple. We won't need a temple there. Okay? How come? I saw no temple in it. This is John's description. For the Lord God the Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. This is household talk. This is family talk. And the city has no need of the sun or of the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God has illumined it, and its lamp is the Lamb. The nations, the ethne, the people groups, will walk by its light, by the Lamb. And the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. Shared rulership. You see? In the daytime, for there will be no night there. Its gates will never be closed. I'm anxious to get to this chapter in our study because that is a super significant thing. The gates will never be closed. And what's behind that is thrilling. And they will bring the glory and the honor of the nations, there they are again, to it. Wow. The point is that Yahweh dwells among us. He's not off beyond Pluto somewhere. He's not inaccessible. He's right where he wants to be, right in the middle of his daughters and sons, his holy ones. And like the divine beings are called holy ones, we are the human holy ones. And that's why you get the white robe and all that, because that's the union suit. That's how you know you're a holy one, because those angels wear them and we wear them, you see. That's what that's all about. But Yahweh dwells with us, and that has always been his plan. So we're starting to see it unfold, okay, with chapter 8. So let's go back to that chapter 8. And let's look at it again, slowly, and try and connect some things that we've already worked through about the Lamb and the scroll and all of that. Take a look there, because the Lamb is opening the seventh and final seal on the scroll, okay? And you get this divine council scene, as we've talked about in Revelation 4 and 5. And in the hand, in that scene, one of the things that happens, one of the transactions, is in the hand of God, who's seated on the throne, is this scroll. And it has 7 seals on it. It's a legal document, because there's a legal proceeding going on. But the scroll is not really opened up, think about it, until you break all the seals. And we're going to see in chapter 8 the last seal broken. Okay? And now it will take off at breakneck speed. Okay? If you read this from chapter 8 all the way to the end, 22, in a sitting, and I highly recommend it. JR, the time we hiked up to Sawtooth, and we looked over the edge, and it was solid ice and snow, and we were going to go over the edge and trek across country to get to another destination, and we looked at that and we thought, we'll all die. We will die if we do that, because we're not prepared to do that. We hadn't counted on snow there in June, but there it was. And so we stayed another day just where we were. We camped there. There were a couple lakes there, and it was very, very nice. And the mule, what do they call those mule-ear deers with the great big ears? Mule deers would come right up to us. It was just beautiful. It was flat, and it was beautiful. And I got tired of fishing. It was too easy. And so I sat down and spent most of the day reading Revelation. I read it twice. And if you start at this chapter 8 and read all the way to the end in one sitting, it will be a dizzying experience with you. Because starting with 8, as I said, we're off to the races. It's breakneck speed now. Because now you're getting the judgment of the nations is unfolding. Okay? We're not just talking about it. And the nations now are going to be judged. The church has already been judged and passed muster. That's why they show up. That's why we show up in chapter 4 and 5. But the judgment of the nations is partly for their treatment of God's people. We've seen God's people under the altar in chapter 6, verse 9, awaiting, and their cry is, "How long, O Lord, before you exact justice on the nations?" And so here we are in this paragraph. And the altar, that's why the altar comes back, because judgment is starting to unfold for God's people that are hiding under it. So you've got this scene, the hand of God, in the hand of God seated on the throne is this legal scroll. It's not really open until all the seals are broken, but once that last seal is broken, we get 6 trumpets. These are 6, you get 7 trumpets actually, but the 7th one is not a judgment. The first 6 are. And these are going to be judgments. It will spill into chapter 9. So chapter 8, chapter 9 really go together. They operate in tandem that way. So in the space of these 2 chapters, we're going to get these 6 trumpets, these judgments, okay? And so let's jump in. The next time, next week we'll get into the trumpet judgments themselves. We won't tonight. And we're going to see, and you may want to jot this down, as we look ahead into those trumpet judgments, you're going to see a definite intentional overlap with something you know really well, the plagues of Exodus. And it's on purpose. John does it on purpose. And he's repurposing the plagues of Exodus to describe what he sees happening to the nations, okay? But let's read it slowly. This is from a different translation. This is from the ESV now. When the Lamb opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. John talking. Then I saw 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. And another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints, all the holy ones, on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the holy ones, the saints. And I believe John is trying to tell us that it's the prayers not only of the human holy ones that have suffered, but it's also the prayers of the divine holy ones. We'll see why in a minute. It's got to do with that silence. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. So the incense, it's lighter than air. It lifts, right? So these prayers are going up. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar. We didn't see this coming. And threw it on the earth, and there were peals of thunder. No silence now. Rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Now the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to blow them. Okay? It's starting. It's starting. Okay? So the sequence starts with a silence in heaven. You notice that? Before the judgments begin to unfold, before we see how horrible they are and how like the plagues of Exodus they are, it says there was silence in heaven. So what is that all about? Well, there are several ways that you can look at it. And I want to give the main ones to you. There are 5. That different smart people looking at this thoughtfully, carefully, have come up with what the silence in heaven is all about. The first one, it may be a silencing of prayer. Because think about it, what goes on in heaven? Praise, prayer, worship, right? Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. We see that in Isaiah's vision. That's the business of heaven. That's a big part of the business of heaven. So the first thought is that the silence is referring to a silencing of prayers in heaven. And the idea is that the praises of the highest orders of divine beings, angels and all the rest, are hushed up. Silence. No more praising divine beings. Like Isaiah, no more of the holy, holy, holies. Okay? They're hushed up. And the prayers of all the saints on the earth can then be heard. And the thought is that with all the praise going on in heaven, all the prayers going on in heaven, these urgent prayers of the saints on earth are not being heard, or might not be heard. This is one way some people look at it. That there's an enforced silence in heaven. It's a forced silence. So that the prayers of the people that are suffering on earth don't get drowned out. That's one idea. Again, because think about it, what else is going on in heaven that would need silencing? Well, that's what's going on in heaven. So that's why the silence. And you also get this, and one of the things that kind of commends this is that you get this incense language here, mingled with the idea of prayers, that prayers are like an incense that's sweet, it's not foul, it's sweet before God, but it also rises. So with that association with the incense language and prayer, it's not really a far-fetched view to say that the silence in heaven is because with all that praise from all these high angels and other divine beings, the suffering people's prayers might get drowned out. Okay? That's one. Okay? That's one. There's another one, that the silence is about the Lamb. Because the Lamb is the one opening the seals, the Lamb is the one that is the central figure here. It is, after all, a revelation of Jesus Christ, who is the Lamb of God. So, keeping the focus on Jesus, not on the end time, not on the cataclysms, not on the judgments, but keeping it where it should be, on Jesus. Some interpreters say, well, the silence it's about the Lamb. And they get this partly from a passage in Isaiah 52, verses 14 through 15, in Isaiah 53 and 52 and 53, you get this picture of the suffering servant, right? Now, I don't think this one is as good an argument as the first one or as a couple that will come after it, but it's not a bad one. It's not a bad way to think about it. When you think about Isaiah 52, verses 14, 15, one version reads this way, just as there were many who were astonished at him. It's talking about the suffering servant. Now, most Old Testament interpreters, Jewish interpreters, when they see the suffering servant in Isaiah 52 and 53, they say, aha, Israel is the suffering servant. Because the people of Israel, the Jewish people, have suffered much. And so the traditional interpretation was always, that's us. That's Israel. Israel is the suffering servant. But just as there were many who were astonished at him, okay, this is the suffering servant from 52 and 53. So marred was his appearance beyond human semblance, and his form beyond that of mortals. So he shall startle many nations. Kings shall shut their mouths because of him. For that which had not been told them they shall see, and that which they had not heard they shall contemplate. Now this argument is basically something like this. Look, verse 14, verse 15 here in Isaiah 52. It's talking about a silencing also, right? Kings shall shut their mouths because of him. Out of astonishment, out of amazement, they will shut their mouths, okay? The silence in this interpretation is a silence of shock. It's a silence of awe in the face of an unexpected discovery. And that is the identity of the suffering servant. That it is not Israel. In this interpretation, what's happening here, John is repurposing it to say, you're going to be stunned into silence because you thought it was one thing all along. The suffering servant was one thing. And you're going to discover that the suffering servant is the Lamb. And you're going to be stunned. The world will be stunned by that. To see that the one that they caused to suffer, that is the suffering servant. You see? The Lamb it's the identity of the suffering servant. It says they were astonished at him. And to discover that he's not a defeated Messiah. For all that he went through, he's not a defeated Messiah. He's a victorious Messiah. The silence is going to be due to the Lamb in the middle of the throne. That's what we're told in Revelation 4 and 5. So in this interpretation, it's because it's about the Lamb that everything gets quiet in heaven. That everybody's awakened to the fact that the Lamb that was slain is now the holder of power. We didn't see that coming. Okay? And it's a time when human reality, cosmic reality, they just collide, and it reveals who God really is. He's a lamb. He's a lamb slain from the foundation of the world. And you're just so shocked and surprised by that everything is quiet. And there's something to commend that. I said it's not the strongest one in my thinking, but there's nothing wrong with it. And there's some, in that Isaiah, there's some associations that you could say that could be it. There's a third one. It's this, that the silence is hooking back into pre-creation silence. When, as Genesis 1 and verse 2 says, the earth was without form, was formless and void. There was no noise. There was nothing to make noise. There was nobody. There was no creature. There was no sound. It was eternal silence until the creation gets going. Well, think about that for a minute. And so in this interpretation, the silence signals kind of an end-time return. Here we're at the end of time. Time is wrapping up, reconciliation of all things. And in this wrap-up, it goes back to a pre-creation silence. Okay? Well, that's kind of a fascinating way to think about it, that the world is going to be turned back to that pre-creation silence for some time. Just like it was at the first beginnings, it's back there now. That's a reversion to the chaos that came before the first creation that included silence. And there's something to commend this, because what we're going to see is, in a sense, the earth is going to be taken apart in this judgment, right? It's going to be put back together, but it's going to be taken apart. It's going to be decreated. And so this idea that silence is because it's going back to that, there may be something to that. The weakness of this one is the fact that the text doesn't see anything about the silence before creation. We're just kind of connecting that dot loosely, but that's the weakness of it. There's a fourth one. Let me get through all five and then we'll wrap. And that is that what we're looking at here with this silence is part of a liturgy ritual. Liturgy is the way you go about a worship service, in some formal setting where you have Bible readings and you have chanting and you have songs and you have incense and you have other things and processions, and it's all part of your liturgy. It's how you go through the act of worship. And we are not a liturgical church, but we have a liturgy too. We have ways that we pray and we have ways that we go through a service and so on, so on, so on. The way we pray for the sick and all that's liturgy. We just don't think of it that way. But this interpretation says what we're looking at here with this silence is part of a liturgy ritual, and there were times in the worship of the Old Testament where it was silent, where the priests went about their business in the temple tabernacle in silence. They were told, do it in silence. We've got this incense thing here, right? We've got an altar reference. We've got prayers that are going on in this passage. Take a look in Psalm 62, verse 1. Somebody else turn to Habakkuk 2, verse 20. And here's a couple cases, and there are many, many more in the Old Testament. And there are places in Second Temple texts, not in the Bible, where you've got priests in the temple at Jerusalem and do things in complete silence. But here's a couple in the Old Testament. 62:1, Psalms. Who's got it?
I waited quietly before God, for my victory comes from him.
I wait quietly before God. Some of our Bibles say, I wait in silence. My soul waits in silence for God only. Okay? So there are times in worship, in a ritual worship, where you would be quiet. It was an enforced silence. Take a look in Habakkuk, chapter 2, verse 20. Who's got it? Anybody? Read it out if you got it.
The Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him.
In his holy temple, let all the earth keep silent. So there were times in worship where you were quiet. In the Old Testament, in extra biblical literature, there are references to times when the Jerusalem priests did their work in complete silence. And that may be what you've got going on in Revelation 8, where it says there was silence in heaven. Okay? Maybe it was for that reason. It was part of the worship. It's time to be quiet. Okay? And so the silence is just there because you're in the presence of God and you're offering up incense and you're burning it and all that sort of stuff. Then silence is the way to go. Okay? Because that's the way it's done. It was done in Jerusalem that way. Maybe it's done there that way. When they were doing stuff in the temple, the priests would be silent. Maybe that's what's happening here. Fifth and final. Okay? It's because of final judgment. Because that's what we're beginning to see with the trumpets. It's going to be final judgment. It's been talked about for centuries. John has talked about it. Jesus has talked about it. Now it's going to happen. The seals are all broken. The scroll is unrolled. You can read the whole thing. And here's what's going to happen. It's beginning to take place. So maybe the silence has something to do. It's because of final judgment. I like this one the best. Okay? Just if you ask me to vote, this would get my vote above the others. Because it seems to hook back more deeply and more securely back into the Old Testament, which is John's pattern. That is his device. And if this is the interpretation, it does a better job of doing what we see John normally doing, going back to the Old Testament to help us see what he's seeing. Because when there are judgments in the Old Testament, there is often a reference to a kind of appalled silence. I'm looking at the judgment of God and I can't speak. It's so huge, it's so final, it's so complete, it's so right, it's so terrible. I mean, the Battle Hymn of the Republic talks about his terrible swift sword. It's terrible, the judgment of God. And sometimes in the Old Testament, when God is judging, there's silence. Let's take a look at a few. Take a look at Psalm 115, Psalm 31, Isaiah 47. For those that are watching online, Psalm 115, 17, Psalm 31, 17, Isaiah 47, 5, Amos 8, 2 through 3, 1 Samuel 2, 9 through 10. But let's come back and look at those in turn. What does 115, 17 of Psalms say?
The dead cannot sing praises to the Lord, for they have gone into the silence of the grave.
The dead that are talked about in this psalm are specifically idolaters, okay, people who have not maintained a believing loyalty to Yahweh. They have run after the gods of the nations that we've talked much about, those other Elohim, those lesser Elohim. They're idolaters, and they die in silence. Their judgment is in silence. That's part of their judgment is silence, okay? But there's another reference to judgment and people that experience silence because of it. 31:17, Psalm 31:17. Who's got that?
Let me not be put to shame, Lord, for I have cried out to you. But let the wicked be put to shame and be silent in the realm of the dead.
Those who persecute God's people, and that's who's being talked about here, are judged by God and sit in silence. Now, maybe they're the ones that are appalled. You know, oh my God, what's happened to me? But that's part of the consequence of their judgment, is this silence. So here you are at the end of history, you know, and you're seeing all this silence. Take a look at Isaiah 47:5. A familiar figure who's going to show up, be repurposed by John a lot in Revelation, is Babylon. Look what happens when Babylon is judged. Isaiah 47:5. Who's got it?
O beautiful Babylon, sit now in darkness and silence. Never again will you be known as the queen of kings.
Sit in silence. And Babylon will be reused by John a bunch, right? You kind of already know that. Babylon, the whore of Babylon. Babylon the Great is fallen is going to be a theme in the middle of Revelation here. But Babylon is silenced because of God's judgment against them. But it's not only Babylon. Take a look at another one. Take a look at Amos chapter 8, verses 2 through 3. It's not just Babylon that is stunned into silence. It's part of their judgment. What do you see?
In that day, declares the sovereign Lord, the songs of the temple will turn to wailing. Many, many bodies flung everywhere. Silence.
Israel is judged, and silence is the result. So, in this final look at what is this silence in heaven all about, why the silence in heaven, What we're finding here is it's because it's final judgment. Just like there were other judgments in the Old Testament, John repurposes that and says, when there was judgment there, people were stunned into silence. They were appalled into silence. And so maybe that's why heaven is silent, because it's looking on the unfolding judgment of the nations. And it's stunned into silence. Take a look at one more. It's kind of a blanket one. 1 Samuel 2, verses 9 and 10. Anybody got it?
He will guard the feet of his faithful servants, but the wicked will be silenced in the place of darkness. It is not by strength that one prevails, for those who oppose the Lord will be broken. The Most High will thunder from heaven, the Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed.
Silence again. Silence again. Well, we're going to leave it there. We're going to pick it up next week. But if you want to read ahead, you're going to notice Babylon. Okay? It's going to become a big factor later in the book of Revelation as the enemy. It is the enemy. Okay? And John's going to repurpose Babylon to describe who the enemy is. Not surprising that we see in Isaiah, but many other places, Babylon is stunned into silence. We'll end there and pick it up next week. We didn't nearly finish. We've got to figure out what this altar picture is all about. Once we do that, then the deck is cleared and we'll start to look at the judgments themselves as the trumpets are blown. This is the judgment of the nations, in part because of the way they've treated the people of God, and the people of God under the altar have been crying out, how long, how long, how long? And so we'll begin to see it unfold. Anyway, and then there's cosmic judgment on top of that. So we'll stop. So thank you for everybody who joined us live stream. And had you been here in person, you'll get a little bonus, but you aren't, so you don't. So we'll see you guys.